loud and clear. Welcome everybody. If you're here online, this is a rookie here doing a live presentation. Hope this works. Good morning. Jeff Brown is on vacation with his family during fall break as they begin. We're glad to have everybody here. Looks like about 250 people in the auditorium. I'm already talking like a preacher. There's an old saying, there's more lies told in the courthouse and the church house than any other two buildings in the county. And anyway, we begin this morning, we'll be in the book of Daniel, chapter 3, an event that happened 2,600 years ago. But the Lord has put in the Bible for us to have today, to read and learn something from. And I think the lesson here in this story you'll find is probably most appropriate to us today and relevant. It's a story that I didn't hear and know about until after I was an adult, but a great story nonetheless. As we begin, my wife reminded me of this song, Keep Your Sunny Side Up. And I don't know how many of you remember this. If you Google it online, you can see Judy Garland singing it, if any of you remember her. But keep your sunny side up and let your laughter shine through. Stand on your legs. Be like two fried eggs. Keep your sunny side up. How are we keeping our sunny side up right now? I know when everything shut down in March, they even sent us home, state employees. We all were sent home, and so I got to pretend what it was like, see what it was like if I retired, and I realized real quick I didn't want to do that. But, so we spent, I'm going to ask you how you spent your time keeping your sunny side up, but my wife and I, we decided to take road trips all over Tennessee, Middle Tennessee. I never will forget the day I said, well, let's go to Bradyville, and Ann starts Googling to find out what stores are in Bradyville. There's a Bradyville Pike, but Bradyville Pike leads really to nowhere but a curve in the road where there's a church building and a little small post office. We were disappointed, but it was a fun excursion. We've been all over, seen a lot of towns. So how have some of you spent your time now? That anybody? What kind of things have you been doing to keep your sunny side up? Watching movies? I mean, yeah, Bart. Different state parks. That's great. Well, you can keep your distance. I've been going to a lot of different golf courses. I kind of been doing the same thing. State parks, that's great. And it's beautiful to get out and be open. How about anybody else? I know Comcast says that they've been selling a lot of movies, renting a lot of movies on TV. So we've been watching movies too, looking for TV programs that nobody's making a TV show anymore. Anyway, it's been a challenge, and it's all because of this. When I first saw this, I thought somebody's taken a softball or a baseball and stuck some yarn in it, and is that what this really looks like? Well, the truth of the matter is, the science of showing you exactly what these things are. They're not just little pieces of yarn sticking out of an old tennis ball, but they really are something. Under the microscope, I suppose. This is a saying that my wife put on the refrigerator door, on her refrigerator, that motivates her every day. And that is, God is still in control. And He is. It may seem like your lives and my life is spun out of control, but it's all come to a screeching halt in a lot of ways, hasn't it? Yes, it has. And so we're going to be in Daniel chapter 3, and it tells a story where life came to kind of a screeching halt for a while for a whole nation. The southern part of Israel, Judah, they were taken in captivity as God had planned and God had promised because of their unfaithfulness. So in about 600 BC, Babylon, God had told Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, which was a great nation, they took over from the Assyrians. And he motivated Nebuchadnezzar somehow. I don't know exactly how, but anyway, Nebuchadnezzar knew it was a time to go take the southern part of Israel captive. And they went and over a period of years literally destroyed the nation and took most of the people captive after killing others and leaving a few behind. And part of those were a story about 4 young men, Daniel and 3 others, and they were brought into the king's court, kind of like the king's prep school, because they were son of royalty. They had been educated, they had been well fed, well groomed, and they had promise. And so the king in Babylon brought them into kind of his prep school. And I want you to think a minute, what would it be like? What would it be like for you if every Christian in Rutherford County, every Christian, were uprooted and taken to, let's say, Mexico City to live? A foreign land, foreign language, a culture with different ways than us, a country where the government was corrupt, where violence is rampant from the drug cartels. It's going to be danger for your family every day. And to be uprooted, just think about how that would feel to you today, to have that happen, and to know that it's going to happen for a long time. I want to show you this letter from Jeremiah here. It's hard to read it all, but so I've kind of highlighted some of it. But Jeremiah was a prophet, and he was left behind in Jerusalem, and he wrote this letter to the exiles in Babylon. And he wrote this letter mainly to the leaders, to the priests that were there, to tell them what God had in mind for them while they were there. And to me, it's important, excuse me while I try to get this towards my notes here. It's important because Jeremiah tells them, in verse 5, he tells them, look, this is what I want you to do. While you're there, God wants you to build your houses, settle down, get married, eat what they produce, eat the local food, marry, have sons and daughters, increase in number. And look at this in verse 7. Seek the peace and prosperity of the city to which I've carried you in exile. Really? These are the people that destroyed everything we have. And you want us to seek peace and prosperity for this? These people? And here's the kicker. Pray to the Lord for it. That is the city, the government. Pray to the Lord for that government. Because if it prospers, you too will prosper. I mean, that's kind of radical. Don't protest. Don't overthrow them. Don't try to kill your captors, but pray for their prosperity. And you'll prosper too. And he also tells them at the end, when 70 years are completed for Babylon, I will come to you and fulfill my good promise to bring you back to this place, Jerusalem. So let me ask you this. Why do you think God let them be taken captive for 70 years? For 70 years. What was so special about that long a period of time? A generation. More than one, probably. How many people would still be alive in this church, in this congregation? How many adults would still be alive after 70 years? Probably none, right? Kind of reminds you of what God did to the children of Israel when they disbelieved and they were in the wilderness and they disbelieved about going to take the land of Canaan, which they had been promised. And how many years did he let them wander in the wilderness? 40. Said, everybody who's an adult, you're not going to be alive, except for Joshua and Caleb and their families. 70 years. Well, Daniel and his 3 buddies, probably under the cutoff. We don't know exactly what their ages are. But we know that, you remember the story about how they wouldn't eat the king's food and they ate what they were allowed under their religion. And then shortly thereafter, the king had a dream and he called all the astrologers in, and nobody could interpret the dream, but Daniel did. God gave Daniel the wisdom and the spiritual knowledge to know to interpret the dream. And so after that, the king Nebuchadnezzar was so impressed with David and the fact that he could interpret the dream, which Daniel gave glory to God, that he promoted Daniel to a very high office. And Daniel says, also my buddies here, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And a story that probably most of you grew up as children being taught. I never was taught it. I didn't go to the Church of Christ. And so for me, it was a story I learned as an adult. Fascinating story. Well, let's look at it, okay? And beginning in chapter 3, the story begins about these 3 men, an event that happened, like I said, 2,600 years ago. King Nebuchadnezzar, in verse 1, made an image of gold. Now, the king has only been in power here for just a few years, and so right away he's wanting to make it clear to everybody he is the man. So he makes this image of gold. And I've translated it here over on the right, about 90 feet high, 9 feet wide. Pretty large object. And he set it up on the plain of Dur in the province of Babylon. Anybody know what the modern day city where Babylon used to be is today? Who knows? What city? Baghdad. Roger that. Baghdad. That's modern day Babylon. It's had several different names in the past, but it's Baghdad today. So the plain of Dur is in the province of Baghdad, but it's well outside the town of Baghdad. And then it says Nebuchadnezzar summoned the satraps, the prefects, governors, advisors. In other words, everybody who's on the government payroll who's somebody, y'all are going to come. Everybody that I've appointed to some kind of job, you're going to come. And you're going to come to the dedication of my statue. So beginning in verse 3, all the satraps, prefects, and everybody assembled for the dedication of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up, and they stood before it. And the pronouncement in verse 6 was, whoever does not fall down and worship will be immediately thrown into a blazing furnace. Okay, so think about this. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they kind of stood up for God when they said, we're not going to eat the king's food when they went through the prep school. So they've already had one little test. But they haven't had a test like anything like this before. They were told to kneel down and worship the image of Nebuchadnezzar. And so this is a story about keeping your faith in tough times. And sometimes, through no fault of your own, we know that we're in a position where we have to make a choice. What will we do? Will we be lazy like Brett was talking about earlier in the lesson? Will we go bury what we have because we don't want to use it? We don't want to be out in the open? Or what are we going to do? So here they are. Now, Daniel is probably in the king's palace. The commentators say he was with the king. This is way outside of Baghdad, outside of Babylon, I mean. But Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego are there. and there's no hiding. They got to make a decision. So what do they stand to lose? What do you think they stand to lose? Their life, for one. What else? Their what? Their position. Yeah, okay, thank you. It's government hearing aids here. Their position, their status, right? Isn't that what drives a lot of people? I'm somebody, I'm important. I don't want to lose this. I'm going to do what I can to protect my little sphere of influence. What else? Their pay, right? Their pay. They're getting paid for this. They're living comfortably. They're well thought of. They got influence. They got power. They were the administrators in the Babylon province. Who's important now today in the Rutherford County? Well, we got the county mayor. We got the tax assessor. We got the trustee. We've got head of water department, well, no longer water. Water's privatized now. We've got the sewer. We've got electric. We've got all these things that we depend on. Sanitation. They're ahead of all these things. They got a lot to lose. Their status, influence, power, and their lives, most importantly. So what happens? At this time, some astrologers came forward and denounced the Jews. You remember the astrologers? They were the ones that couldn't interpret the dream. And so what happens when Daniel interprets the dream correctly? What do you think happens to the astrologers? They're backseat. They're persona non grata. They're not Mr. Big Stuff anymore. But they found a way to weasel back in. And they're the ones accusing Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego of what? They said to King Nebuchadnezzar, "May the king live forever." This is what you call sucking up. Okay? May the king live forever. And so they say what's happened here. And going down to verse 12, but there are some Jews you have set over the affairs of the province of Babylon. Get this, they're the ones, that's what the word are worried about, right? Some Jews that the king set over the province now have betrayed the king, is what essentially they're saying. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego pay no attention to you, your majesty. They neither serve your gods nor worship the image of gold you've set up. Remember when the high priest tempted Jesus about the coin paying taxes? They later accused him of being disloyal to Caesar. So, they neither serve your gods nor worship the image of gold you've set up. They didn't do what you said. You drew a line in the sand, so to speak, right? Have you ever heard leaders draw a line in the sand and then back down from that? What happens? Not good. So, furious with rage, Nebuchadnezzar summoned them. They're out on the plain of Dura. He summons them back to the palace. And so these men were brought before the king, and Nebuchadnezzar said to them, "Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the image I made?" Now, and I kind of skipped some parts of this verse here, but now in verse 15, if you're ready to fall down and worship the image I made, very good. But if you do not worship it, you will be thrown immediately into a blazing furnace. Then what God will be able to rescue you from my hand? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to the king, "King Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter." They don't call the king a clown. They don't call the king any bad words. They just said, we don't need to answer you in this regard. We don't need to defend ourselves. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and he will deliver us from your majesty's hand. But even if he does not, we want you to know, your majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up. We're not going to kneel down to your flag. We're not going to kneel down to your image. We're just not going to do it. We serve God. Now, let me ask you a question. I once had a professor who said when we were studying, and he said, don't just read the chapter here. Ask yourself, why did they put this chapter in the book? Why is this in here? Why are you studying this? Why did the editor put this in the book? And we know the editor of the Bible is God. He decided what was going to be in this Bible. So why do you think God included this story in the Bible? Ask yourselves. Why do you think he had this one? Yes, Don.
I think we all get tested at times in much less harmful ways than this, and yet it is still a test. Are you going to stand up for God? And I think this kind of story gives us courage to say, wait a minute, it's a little thing that I give up, but I still have to defend my belief.
Okay, Don says, God is always going to test us. We're being tested, and this is an example of a test. We don't have a test that has this kind of consequences to it, but we're all tested. Everyone in here is old enough to know and remember the times you were tested, the times you failed, and the times you passed the test. Right? So we're here for a test. I want to show you just a little illustration about the area we're talking about here, because we're about to go into a blazing furnace. And I wanted you to see this, that this is basically a very rough picture of map of Iraq, present-day Iraq. There was no borders of Iraq back then, just empires. And the Babylons had a whole lot of land in their empire. But today, modern-day Iraq, right out there before that, ahead of that black dot at the end of the red arrow, is essentially where the plain of Dura is. A little outside of Baghdad, about 30, 40 miles outside of Baghdad. And this is a picture I took when I was over there on a vehicle. Actually, I was driving it at the time. Took with a camera. And this is what the plain of Dura sort of looks like. I mean, those are not trees you see where smoke's coming out of. There are no trees. You could scout for 2 days and not find enough firewood to keep you warm for a day. There are brick ovens, hundreds of brick ovens. They make bricks out there, and there are hundreds of brick ovens out there in the plain of Dura, or what was known as the plain of Dura. And they were outside our base too, but this is just an example of modern day. This wasn't a picture taken by me, it was our photographer. It's so good, you can tell. But this is what they're doing. They're loading mud, little squares of mud, and this is another picture, again, taken by a very professional photographer, our unit photographer, not me. But you see very irregular blocks just stacked in here in these big ovens. They're big enough, and I think there's like 7 people in here, 5 men, 2 women. And they load these bricks by hand off a donkey cart, still today. They're not driving a truck, not driving a John Deere 4-wheeler, you know, riding around. This is the way they do it today, at least in 2005. And about twice a month, we saw outside our base these brick ovens fire up, and this is just burning crude oil, and droplets kind of fall on all your stuff. It's so thick in the air, and you smell it. It's just burnt oil. So Nebuchadnezzar was furious. We'll get back to our story. Nebuchadnezzar was furious, beginning in verse 19 here, and his attitude toward them changed. In other words, he liked them. They were trusted, and they did a very good job running the affairs of the business. Yes, Kitty?
There was a comment online that says that the reason that this is...
Put your mic up to you, man. This is Kitty. She's monitoring the online comments.
There was a comment online that said that in response to your question on why was this in there, and it says to show God's power and his goodness.
Great. Yes. Thank you for that. To show God's power and goodness. Well, we're going to see that in a few minutes, but yes, The story doesn't end here. So he ordered the furnace heated 7 times hotter than usual. And I showed you the pictures of the ovens because I always wondered, how do you make a wood fire 7 times hotter? Well, maybe you can, but if you got oil, and I don't know that they were using oil, but the brick ovens that I just showed you pictures of, they just had pools, ponds of oil, crude oil. That's Iraq, just everywhere. And it just flowed by gravity into the ovens. Yes, Don?
They had pitch. They were very aware of pitch, which is really just crude oil solidified.
Don says they were very well aware of pitch, and it was just crude oil that had solidified. And they used it as a fuel. And let me tell you, those ovens that I just showed you, after they load up all those things, they come out and they fire those things up for about 3 or 4 days, and they can put whatever heat they want to in there, depending on how many bricks they got in there to fire. But he said he ordered it heated 7 times hotter than usual. Now, don't leave here and think that I've said it was oil that they used. The Bible doesn't say that. But you saw the pictures. There were no trees, and it didn't look like there was any coal. So I don't know what they used, but I think it was probably oil. And Nebuchadnezzar commanded some of the strongest soldiers in an army to tie them up, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and throw them into the blazing furnace. So these men, wearing their robes, trousers, turbans, and other clothes, were bound and thrown into the blazing furnace, and the king's command was so urgent, and the furnace was so hot, that the flames of the fire killed the soldiers who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And these 3 men, firmly tied, fell into the blazing furnace. All right. So if you're the leader of the largest empire in the world, and 3 of your political appointees show blatant public disloyalty to you, what are you going to do? You got to do something, right? And remember, the Bible says Nebuchadnezzar's attitude toward them changed. He liked them. But I mean, he's got all these astrologers and other folks watching. I mean, they all saw it. They wouldn't bow down. They all saw the disobedience, or as we say it in the military, insubordination, right? What do you do with insubordination? You got a teacher that works in your system and she's insubordinate. What do you do? You got an employee that's insubordinate. What do you do? You can't walk away from that unless you don't want to be the leader anymore. So he shows everybody, this is an example, people. Let this be an example to everybody. Then King Nebuchadnezzar leaped to his feet in amazement and asked his advisors, "Weren't there 3 men that we tied up and threw into the fire?" And they replied, "Certainly, Your Majesty, there was." So he's looking. The door's open. Remember, the men that threw him in died because it was so hot. Maybe it burned off the doors. I don't know. But they see 4 people in there. And he said, "Look, I see 4 men walking around the fire, unbound and unharmed, and the 4th looks like a son of the gods." Do you believe this story really happened? Do you really believe this story happened? I do. Of course. Of course. Nebuchadnezzar then approached the opening of the blazing furnace and shouted, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High, come out, come here." So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out of the fire. Not the 4th person, just those 3. And the satraps, prefects, governors, royal advisors crowded around him. Can you just see this? Everybody's hoping, what? We're finally rid of these 3 Jews. They're foreigners. How do you feel when a foreigner gets elected to some high office or takes over some government position and now it's a foreigner? I mean, what do you think? You think naturally what everybody else thinks. Why not one of us? I mean, they're all thinking the same thing we would think, right? and they want to see it for themselves. So it's a message for everybody. And they saw that the fire had not harmed their bodies, nor was a hair of their heads singed, nor the robe scorched, and there was no smell of fire on them. Now that is amazing, right? It's a great story, great event. Then Nebuchadnezzar said, "Praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego." He's already done this once with Daniel. Remember when Daniel interpreted his dreams, he's already said, "Praise be the God of Daniel," right? And now same song. Praise be their gods, who's sent his angel and rescued his servants. They trusted him and defied the king's command and were willing to give up their lives rather than serve or worship any god except their own God. Therefore, I decree that the people of any nation or language who say anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be cut into pieces, and their houses be turned into piles of rubble, for no other God can save in this way. You know, Nebuchadnezzar was a pretty brutal king. God's later going to take his kingdom away and destroy him, but he's pretty brutal, and he was not short on violence. And so he kind of goes from, I'm going to do violence to these guys. Now, anybody that says anything to them, you're going to hurt too, in a bad way. And the last event of the story is, then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. Now, what would you think if you were one of those satraps and all those other governors and whatnot? What would you think about them? Where are you now? I mean, if three guys were ever untouchable, now they're untouchable. Not only are they back to their positions, but they're higher. They have more power, more authority. I mean, you don't tell these guys no when they come to tell you what you owe in taxes. I'm not saying everybody has a pit right now that they're in a fire, but sometimes in your life you have been. This COVID, Corona, whatever you call it, it's affected us all. I mean, it's changed everything. We have people in this congregation who've been afflicted with it. Even our president is hurting right now because of it. From the very highest to the ordinary, over 200,000 people in this country alone have died. Millions in the world. It's going across. And of course, we don't know how many in China and Russia and those places. They're not going to tell us the truth of how many people are sick or have died because of it. But a bunch of people. People have suffered illness, separation, even death, loneliness. My wife and I, we've been blessed because our children and grandchildren live right here. We live with them, essentially. Basically, we moved to Murfreesboro to be close to them. And so we see them every week. We have a meal over at our house. And we get together. Not everybody has that. There are people in this very congregation who are alone 24/7. Pat's shaking her head, nodding her head, yes. She knows. One of our outstanding healthcare professionals. We're so glad we have Christians doing that. But no doubt she's weary and tired. But the loneliness of it. Can you imagine as a nurse how you're feeling when you're standing by a bedside of someone whose family can't be there while they're suffering and dying? What that's like? The sequestration. I mean, basically since March, it's shut down. We're missing fellowship. You know, I kind of have a sort of a mild little fellowship. I get here a little early on Sunday mornings And with my mask on, kind of make the rounds of the people that I can talk to. I saw Pat talking up to John and Pat Knox up on the balcony there. You have to make an effort to get around and just say hi to people. It's not like it used to be. We don't have church fellowships. We don't have James Tidwell. I was talking to him the other day on the phone and told him we were going to start up Sunday school in October, and he said, what are they going to have? Because John was in charge of he did a lot of the coffee. James, did a lot of the coffee. And he said, we're going to have the coffee thing. I said, are you kidding? Of course not. You couldn't get people out of there. Right? Set up 60 gallons of coffee, and what do you got? You know, you got people yap, and relishing with either, because we've missed it. We've missed it. I didn't think I'd ever have to, sort of like back in 2000, after 9/11, I didn't know the difference between Iraq and Iran, like Alan Jackson said. I didn't know what COVID was. I saw it on a TV show one time recently before it all hit, and there it is, okay? What was the TV show we were watching, Ann, that had it on there? The Resident? Okay. So, what are our lessons here from what God is speaking to us through this story? Why He kept it in the Bible? I think one of them is our excellence, our work, who we are, our faith gives us a platform for God. We have a platform. If you're a 1-talent person or a 10-talent person, you got a platform with somebody, whether it's your family, whether it's your neighbor, co-workers, people at school, whatever it is, you got a platform. And so the platform is determined about who we are and how we live. How I excel at work, school, our relationships. We either build or erode our platform, our standing to speak to others about God. It may only be just a word, a phrase that you can say to somebody. And in an office where I work, when I'm around people, in a courthouse, when I'm around people in my family, to turn a phrase, to say something, may be that one seed. If you're lazy, if you come to work unprepared, if you go to school and don't have your lesson, what do people think about the quality of person you are? Are they going to listen to you? You're always sloughing off? No. Be good at what you do. Be the best that you can be. Trite phrase at the Army's or Marines. That's the Marines. Let me ask you this. Does God make bad things happen to good people? Do bad things happen to good people? Yes. Does God make bad things happen to good people? No. No. He can use bad things for His glory, Kitty says. Great comment. You think about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. We know God sent them into captivity, right? He picked Nebuchadnezzar. He sent them to Babylon. He said, this is the way it's going to be. You're gone. 2 generations are going to be wiped out. Easily 2 generations before I bring you back. But what did He say? You got work to do when you get there. Marry, prosper, pray for the government, support the government. Because if the government does well, you'll do well. All those things. Learn the language. Get along. Be the best you can be. In a foreign country, don't burn it down. Don't rebel. Don't protest. He told them to excel. It kind of like goes along with what Kitty just said. God's not going to save you from the fire, but He will bring you through it. Did Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego think when they were in the prep school they were going to be thrown in a fiery furnace? Not on your life. Did they ever think they'd be tested like that? No. But it happened. And they didn't expect it to happen, but it happened. And they made the right decision, the right choice. Sarah Coleman, I quoted her. This came from an article that I found online from her. God's not going to save you from the fire, but he will bring you through it. God didn't make the fire. He didn't make Nebuchadnezzar do that. But look at this passage in Isaiah that maybe Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego had been taught by their parents, a priest or something. I don't know. But look at this. In chapter 43 of Isaiah, Isaiah said, quoting from God, he's repeating what God has told him to preach. In verse 2, when you pass through the waters, I will be with you. When you pass through the rivers, they will not sweep over you. And when you walk through the fire, you will not be burned. The flames will not set you ablaze. Now, I don't know if Isaiah was talking about what was going to happen in captivity with Meshach, Shadrach, and Abednego. And I don't know that he was really talking about real rivers. But I know what Jesus was talking about. In John chapter 16, Jesus said, after he tells his apostles all the bad things that's going to happen to them, he says, I've told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In other words, don't get shook up or rattled by it. In this world, what? You will have trouble. But take heart, I have overcome the world. Jesus said that. Okay, it's not just some prophet that doesn't apply to us anymore. It's Jesus who said it. And so after we go through this fire, whatever that fire is for you and for me, we will see our promotion. Just like Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego got their promotion, we'll see ours. And what is that promotion? What is that promotion? Blessed is the one who perseveres under trial, because having stood the test, the person will receive the crown of life that the Lord has promised to those that love him. Okay. That sounds so far away right here when we're going through this, right? When you're in the fire. But have you ever come through a fire, a trial, a tribulation in life, and years later you look back at it and you say, I came through that? You know, Jeff has talked, and he's a great teacher. I'm sorry you're missing him today. I'm sorry I'm missing him today. But he's a great, great Bible teacher, I think. And the thing Jeff talks about a lot, this is not my home. This is not my real home. This stuff I've got, this position I have, this family I have, this is not my home. This is not my home. I'm just a passing through, like the song says. I said that the other day. We were having a conversation in the office about somebody, some choices somebody had made. And some evil person had hurt some victims, and talking to victim witness coordinators, and we were talking about how sad it was that what this victim had suffered. And I just made the comment, you know, I'm just glad this place is not my home. And those two women both turned smartly and said, exactly, that's exactly right. This place is not my home. And like Jeff repeatedly tells us, we're passing through. You know, when I was in college, when I was of those years of 20, 21, everybody said, what are you going to do to make the world, right, a what? Better place to live. Well, those of you that lived in the 60s, is today any worse than what it was in the 60s? Really? I mean, I heard some young person say, our world has never been like this before. We're ripped apart, we have protests, people are on and on and on. And I said, what are you talking about? Go back to 1965, 66, 67. We had protesters and counter-protesters, hate the Army, love America, burning down the street, black people being dragged by sheriffs and law enforcement for doing nothing, in their coats and ties being dragged like animals. Our country was ripped to smithereens, and we had television. I never will forget watching the Chicago Democratic Convention, the Chicago police literally beating protesters, long-haired protesters, beating them to death in the streets. On TV. I'd never seen anything like that. I thought this was the end for the country. You ever been in a locker room in high school? You might have seen this sign. It was in my locker room when I was in high school at DuPont. It was on the door. You had to pass through it before you went out on the basketball court. When the going gets tough, the tough get going. In other words, what kind of person are you going to be? I like this quote from Vince Lombardi. Basically, a lot of it comes from the Bible. But being how it's football season, and I'm wearing a tie that I probably never get to wear again, hopefully, but we got Florida, Georgia, Alabama, probably the last time I'll get to wear it. Watch your thoughts, they become your beliefs. Watch your beliefs, they become your words. Watch the words, they become your actions. Watch your actions, they become your habits. And finally, most importantly, watch your habits, they become your character. What kind of character are you going to have when you're called upon to choose what you do? Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they had a habit of doing the right thing always. They made that choice early on a small thing about what they were going to eat. When it came to a big deal, they made the right decision. They made the right decision. Anybody got any comments? Yes, Paul.
Illustration Jesus tries to give. Jesus wasn't in the Old Testament, of course, but it's an illustration to contemporary times today that Jesus is a friend that sticks closer than a brother.
Jesus is what?
Jesus is a friend that sticks closer than a brother.
Jesus is a friend closer than a brother. Great comment, Paul. Yes. He's still alive. He's here. He's told us we're going to have troubles, okay? I don't want to say man up and get on with it, but we got work to do. Just like Brett said today, we got work to do, okay? And it's not, we're not at recess. Yes, Kitty.
And the world is watching how we as Christians handle this crisis. So if we handle it non-Christian, that's what they're going to see. It's going to be a stone for them to overcome. I mean, we're going to cause people to stumble, or we can build people up by how we respond.
Great comment, Kitty. The world is watching us, how we handle this crisis. Jeff has said over and over, they're watching. How are we going to do it? Are we going to have a positive influence, particularly during this election cycle, which hopefully will be over with by the time, I won't say that. We'll have a vaccine sometime. And just like polio, we'll just be hearing stories about it, okay? Just like happened with polio. There'll be stories about it. And we'll remember it. And our children will remember it. But that's all it'll be is a memory. Anybody else? God bless you, and thank you for sitting through the class today. Appreciate your participation. Have a great week.
All right, everybody. I hope that you are doing good. I want to see if I've gotten my audio connections established and everything. So let's see if I am live or not. It says that I am. And however, I'm not yet seeing anybody on here. Is there anybody on here? Kingwood Church of Christ. Looks like we're live with 7 people watching. Can you hear me okay, those of you that are watching? Let's see if I can. Yep, yep. All right, Gary Guthrie and Shirley Hurst. I see that you are watching, but all right, there are the Nances. Roy and Billy are on board. That's good to know. Okay, Shirley Hurst is on here. The Nances can hear. All right, I'm going to do my typical sound check. So I'm going to try one of my slides, and I'm going to be talking behind it. I want you to tell me if you can still hear me. I am speaking about Nehemiah tonight. Today is October the 4th. It is a Sunday. Rodney says showing Bible class is the title. Well, I changed that. It shouldn't show that anymore. Rodney says he can hear me fine. All right. I changed the title on Restream, so I'm not sure why that's not acting properly. Let me see. I don't know. That's weird. You never know. I'm not going to worry about that. We'll change that after the fact. I'll make Brett do some his Brett magic. All right. So I'm heard. Apparently, you can hear me. It's showing the wrong title. Unfortunately, I apologize for that. But and you can hear behind the slides. Mine says Nehemiah. Yeah, I think what happened was when I first pulled it up, it said class, and then I changed it. And so some of you may be on the old stream, which I guess is the same. I don't know. But anyway, I'm getting folks on here now. I've got Shirley, the Nances, the Guthries, Katie Goldman Vaughn, Rodney and Sandy King, Miss Brenda Malone. Also have a few others picking up here on my phone. Priscilla Northcutt and Susie Bolin, Brenda Malone. I think I mentioned Melody McCarver. Okay, so it's funny. Some of these pop up on my computer and some pop on my phone, but it's not always the same. So, but anyway, you get to see the same face though. I'm sorry about that. It's the same one I see every morning in the mirror. But that's just the way it goes. So I'm excited about tonight's message on from Nehemiah. We'll be in the last part of chapter 2 and in chapter 3, and we'll jump in here in just a second. Hopefully you guys are doing well. I see the Taylors have joined, and Dorothy Fox is here with us tonight. So glad to hear that. Hope that you all are doing well, staying healthy. And that you have had a good afternoon. And I guess if you're a Titans fan, we did not lose today, so that's good news. And if you're a Tennessee fan, you won yesterday. If you're a Vanderbilt fan, it's another year. I'm not sure what else to say. MTSU is kind of having a rough year as well, so. But anyway, we're going to have a great time tonight here. And anyway, Margaret Anthony, your son did great this morning. Yes, he did. His mother has trained him so well, and it's a blessing to watch God work in our kids. And we see all the ups and downs, and then we get to see those moments, and we kind of look at each other like we didn't do that. That's a God thing, and so we're thankful for how Josh is growing in his faith and in his maturity. And so I appreciate that, Margaret. I see Shannon Johnson is here. Melody McCarver says, have I been to Oregon lately? I'm glad you asked. That's a good transition. I'll mention that, and then we'll jump into class. This shirt is was part of a fundraiser for the for the Sequoia Campus Church, which is in the city of Eugene, Oregon. They are trying to start a church on and with Oregon University students, and they've been there probably a year now. And one of my former students at Antioch, and a couple of other folks, they're all through Raiders for Christ, have gone up there. They felt the call to go there, like Brett was talking about this morning, and minister to that very worldly campus. And Christianity in the Pacific Northwest is a very much a minority. And so they're doing a great job networking, and it's been tough having COVID and a university campus and all that, but they're hanging in there. So I kind of wore this. I got this shirt the other day. They sent it to us, and I want to support the church plant that they're trying to do there. And so that is Jonathan and Mackenzie Young and Kurt Gallagher, and there's probably some others, but that's what this is about. And I've never been to Oregon. So there you go. There's the answer. All right. I see Joanne Lowe, Cheryl Jones, David Peck. One of them was active in our youth group. That would be Mackenzie. Mackenzie Kenyu was married Jonathan Young, David Young's son, and they are up there. So doing a great job. All right, Myrtle Schaefer, and you've dragged Bob along, so good deal. Let's jump into the Word. Let's start with a prayer, and then we'll begin in Nehemiah chapter 2. Our Father in heaven, thank you for today. Thank you for the blessings, the beautiful fall weather, just the fact that the seasons change and we have that cool nip and the color in the trees, the fire, if you will, that we see, and the brisk mornings and evenings. And Father, it's just we're thankful for the change of seasons. We're thankful that we know change is coming as well, and that your healing touch, your healing the land, healing people, healing relationships, all of that will be made new when you set things aright. And Father, we also know that in the meantime, we have you as our comfort and as our provider, and as someone who we can join in those things, helping people come to know you. And Father, thank you for the story of Nehemiah, and look forward to the study tonight. Bless it. And it's through Jesus we pray. Amen. Amen. All right. So let's begin in Nehemiah chapter 2. I'm going to do a quick presentation check to make sure you guys can hear me. So I'm going to be talking behind this slide, and then I'm going to put that back up there, and hopefully you can hear me. It shows that my mic is working and that you all are hearing me fine, I hope. So if someone will chime in there and let me know that you are hearing me, I would really appreciate that. So let's review. Let's review a little bit. And Chip says yes, we can hear you. So good. I appreciate that very much. So here's what we were talking about. Nehemiah, when God wants something done, he often starts with a person, and that's kind of been something that we have established, that Nehemiah had this call on his life. He heard about the wall being in ruins, and then he had this reaction. And we kind of pointed out that there are three qualities of the person God wants to use: their passion, their prayer, and they're prepared to serve. And so as we think about rebuilding our life, and we've talked a little bit about, what happens when I don't have my blocks stacked up very quickly here, but I can get them. When we have our life, and then all of a sudden it crumbles and everything's all messed up, how do we put this things back together? How do we rebuild? Well, God often starts with a person. He looks for someone who's got those qualities and passion, and their heart is touched and they feel that call and they're prayerful. They realize they need the resources of God. It's not all about them, and then they're prepared to serve. And so then we talked last week about Nehemiah being willing to step through the door. He had all of these things in his corner, so to speak, but then he had to actually do something because he was the cupbearer to the king, and the king asked him, "Why are you sad?" And he had to step through there and say, "Okay, I'm going to tell him why I'm sad." And he said, "My home city is in ruins, and the walls are down, and the gates are burned." And so he had to be faithful in that moment to say, "We need to do something," and take that step of faith, not knowing what the king might say or Xerxes might say, but because Nehemiah stepped through that door, God was there to meet him with opportunities and resources. And he gave him letters and safe passage and some other things to help him on his trip. He just wanted to know when he was coming back. So God met Nehemiah's call and faithfulness with this opportunity. And so, I wished it was that easy. And I wish that was kind of the end of the story, right? In some ways, that Nehemiah jumped right in and the wall was built and everything went super smooth and the rebuilding process was great. Well, we know that's not reality. We know that's not what happened in this case. We know that Nehemiah faced many, many obstacles. And we're going to talk a little bit at the end of chapter 2 and chapter 3 tonight about those obstacles, or at least about one or two of them. But I'm kind of calling this lesson Two Kinds of People. Two kinds of people. Now, you may be able to say, "Oh, there's more kinds of people than that." And yeah, there are, but follow me on this one. Follow me on this one. There are two kinds of people. I think there are those who oppose God's work and those who join God's work. Those who oppose God's work and those who join God's work. And we're going to see here in Nehemiah, in this section, those who oppose God's work and those who join God's work. And we're going to learn a little bit about them. So let's start with Nehemiah chapter 2, verse 10. And we're presented with this opportunity to meet some folks. When Sanballat the Horonite and Tobiah the Ammonite official heard about this, in other words, they heard that Nehemiah was coming, they were very much disturbed that someone had come to promote the welfare of the Israelites. Well, right away, we're introduced to these two people, Sanballat and Tobiah, and they're upset someone else is getting checked on. Well, right away, that kind of gives us a little bit of insight into what kind of people these are. They're upset that someone's checking on the Israelites, and so those who oppose God's work have already shown their true selves, their color, and we're just getting to know them. So hang with me here. We're going to bounce back and forth between things here a little bit. And so then here we have a little account from Nehemiah. I went to Jerusalem, and after staying there 3 days, I set out during the night with a few others. I'd not told anyone what my God had put in my heart to do for Jerusalem. There were no mounts with me except the one I was riding on. So Nehemiah goes out at night with just a few people, kind of on a secret mission, if you will. He's the only one riding a horse, and he's checking things out. By night, I went out through the valley gate toward the jackal well, and the dung gate, examining the walls of Jerusalem, which had been broken down, and its gates, which had been destroyed by fire. Then I moved on toward the fountain gate and the king's pool. But there wasn't really enough room for my mount to get through, so there was such a pile of rubble, he couldn't even get through. So I went up the valley by night, examining the wall. Finally, I turned back and re-entered through the valley gate. The officials didn't know where I'd gone or what I was doing, because as yet I'd said nothing to the Jews, or the priests, or nobles, or officials, or any others who would be doing the work. Then I said to them, "You see the trouble we're in. Jerusalem lies in ruins, and its gates have been burned with fire. Come, let us rebuild the wall of Jerusalem, and we will no longer be in disgrace. I also told them about the gracious hand of my God on me and what the king had said to me. And they replied, let us start rebuilding. And so they began this good work. All right, so we'll stop there. So Nehemiah arrives in Jerusalem. He inspects the wall. He meets the people. And it's interesting. Remember, Sanballat and Tobiah were not excited that someone had come to check on Jerusalem. But, Nehemiah seems very interested in not being really about self-promotion. Dun da da da, I'm here to fix the wall. That's not what he did. He kind of said, all right, I'm coming in under the radar. I'm going to check things out. I'll go low at night, I'm more concerned about others' well-being. I'm not going to say anything until I'm ready to speak, and really, kind of unleash this vision. And he examined it at night. He's not saying anything ahead of time. And if you think about the language he used, I don't know if I'm not going to put it up on the screen, but it's interesting. He says it's very unselfish. He says, "What my God had put in my heart to do for Jerusalem." And he would mention the trouble that we are in. Come, let us rebuild. We will no longer be in disgrace. Now, again, where was Nehemiah? He was up at the Winter Palace, and all of a sudden, he's now associating himself with these people who are really in dire straits. They're completely unprotected from anything, and so he is very unselfish, and so he represents and is someone who wants to join God's work. He's not opposed to God's work. He joins God's work. And in fact, Nehemiah, what does he say kind of in the verse 18 there? I told him about the gracious hand of my God on me and what the king had said. I mean, he's telling them this story about what God's up to, what God's work is, and the people respond by saying, let's start rebuilding. I mean, they're getting excited. They're catching it's like, really? The king is for that? I mean, that you can just kind of feel this excitement about rebuilding, right? You have those few people that are like, nah, I'm thinking you guys, I'm concerned you guys are checking on people here. And then you've got this Nehemiah, this bright light who is going around, and he's checked on things, and he's like, the king's given us permission. Let's rebuild. We can do this. And so, again, as we apply this to our lives, and we think about how do we put our lives back together, what a process this is. It's not an overnight snap your fingers together kind of thing. Whenever we have to put our lives back together after a tragedy or some events or bad choices or whatever it is, and you're going to have some opposition. But you're also going to have some people who are ready to join you, and that's what we see here. So let's look at another example here of some more opposition. Okay, again, the same group of people, but when Sanballat the Horonite, Tobiah the Ammonite official, and now you add Geshem the Arab, heard about it, they mocked and ridiculed us. What is this you're doing? They asked. Are you rebelling against the king? And Nehemiah answered them by saying, the God of heaven will give us success. We as servants will start rebuilding. But as for you, you've got no share in Jerusalem or any claim or historic right to it. Well, let's again, here's those two kinds of people, right? Oppose God's work and join God's work. And you have Sanballat, Tobiah, and now Geshem, who choose to mock and ridicule. And, let's think about it. We know the power of words. We know the power of words to create fear and to create chaos and havoc and to discourage. And those are powerful weapons. But you've got to love the fact that Nehemiah counters and says, the God of heaven will give us success, and we're going to start rebuilding, and for you, get out of here. Again, that's a little bit of a paraphrase on my part, but he's like, no, you're not a part of this. You guys take a hike, right? We're focused. God's doing this, and we're joining Him, and we're focused on what's going on here. And so, I love that. And really, Nehemiah gives them some words there, but what's really their response? What's really their response, and what should be our response when someone starts yakking? I mean, how many times have you said, "I'm going to do something"? Let's break it down to something simple slash maybe non-spiritual. Okay, I'm going to make a change in my life. I'm going to start doing more of this and less of this. And people are like, "Hey, you can't do that. It's too hard." And how many times does Satan jump in there into our minds with temptations through other people, through our own weaknesses and fears, and go, "You really shouldn't. I don't think you're going to be able to do that, right? You're not going to be able to succeed in that." And they start just trying to tear you down. Well, Nehemiah says, "All right, that's fine. You got no part of this. We're going to start rebuilding because actions speak louder than words. Just show them. Just do it, right?" And that's kind of what I love about that verse. Let me flash that up there again. I answered by saying, "The God of heaven will give us success. We're going to start. We're going to start rebuilding. But as for you, you've got no claim. You guys are outsiders anyway. You're not part of God's people. And you're just throwing trash on us. You're just heaping insults on us. Oh, and it's going to get better. Don't worry." But when I say get better, I mean you're going to really see them show out here more and more in this story. But all good things like this, all good rebuilding projects, there's usually opposition. Everybody is not going to say, "Ah, that's a great idea," What about this Oregon thing? I mean, this is just coincidence. I didn't pre-think this, but what if someone said, "Oh, y'all are just a bunch of kids. You're just a bunch of young college students, and you're going to a really dark place, and it's a really worldly place, and Christianity is pretty hostile, I mean, you shouldn't. I mean, you should really get more experience and get more money and get more older people, and again, I'm not part of the insights of all of every decision that was made there. And that's not what this is about. I'm using this as a kind of a surface level example of just go show everybody what God is showing you, right? God's behind this. If He's behind it, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. And so I love that. I love that what Nehemiah says is we're going to respond with action. We're going to rebuild. Get out of here. And so sometimes we have to say that. You have to say it to Satan. God's on my side. This is what I'm doing. Take a hike. Get out of here. And sometimes we have to say that to other people. Either help me or get out. And I love you, but you're not helping me with this. And those are hard decisions to make. And so I want to use we've kind of finished chapter 2 there, and we've seen this pattern of those who oppose and those who support and want to join. And I'm going to show us a couple of quick snapshots from chapter 3. And I encourage you to read this on your own. It's, another 32 verses, it looks like. And I'm just going to pick out 2 or 3 little things here. But this is some examples of what it looks like when people join God's work. And, whether we're talking about rebuilding Kingwood after COVID, whether we're talking about rebuilding our family or our own personal life, get into the flow and vision of what Nehemiah is saying here. So let's look at this first snapshot. And it's interesting because there are actually 40 different key men listed and about 45 sections of this wall that are being repaired and 10 gates. And so it's a pretty long description, and I'm not going to get into every wall piece, every gate, every person. I'm going to take these 3 snapshots and make an observation from each. So let's jump in there and take this first one. Again, what does it look like to join God's work? 3 snapshots from Nehemiah 3. The first one, Nehemiah 3, verses 8 through 12. I'm going to do my best not to hatchet these names, but Uzziel, son of Hariah, one of the goldsmiths, repaired the next section, and Hanani, one of the perfume makers, made repairs next to that, and they restored Jerusalem as far as the broad wall. Raphiah, son of Hur, ruler of a half district of Jerusalem, repaired the next section. Joining this, Jediah, son of Harumaph, made repairs opposite his house. Makes sense. And Hattush, son of Hashabaniah, made repairs next to him. Malchijah, son of Haram and Hashab, son of Pahath and Moab, repaired another section, and the tower of the ovens. I wonder what in the world that is. Shallum, son of Halahesh, ruler of a half district of Jerusalem, repaired the next section with the help of his daughters. So you have this this section here where a lot of different names and people are involved in rebuilding these sections. And I'm going to point out a couple of things here. And first one is, when rebuilding, everyone can and should be doing something, right? I mean, if we're talking about a church, and Brett gave a great challenge today about using our talents, but if we're talking about rebuilding Kingwood or rebuilding something, everybody's got to be doing something. We've all got to be pushing. We've all got to be lifting. We've all got to be building. It can't just be a few people and everybody else sitting around critiquing and watching. We're going to talk about that here in a minute as well. But again, pay attention. What were some of those folks in verse 8? Uzziel was a goldsmith. Hanani was a perfume maker. What do they know about wall building? I mean, let's make this wall smell good, or let's make it out of... No, you're not exempt because of that. You're still building your wall. You're still helping to build this wall around Jerusalem, to put it back together. You may have to make sacrifices and do something you're uncomfortable with, or do something that's way out of your comfort zone. What about verse 10? Jediah, he made repairs opposite of his house, right? And there are other examples of that in later verses of chapter 3, at least 4 others, right? Where people are making repairs outside their house. Okay, there's a certain logic, right? You know, why walk necessarily down the road to build the wall when there's a broken wall right in front of your house? Everybody's got situations they need to be working on. Start there, right? Bloom where you're planted, so to speak. And so I love that little insight there to the story. And then the last one, Shallum, with the help of his daughters, is rebuilding. And I think I mentioned that. Let's back up. 3 verse 12, repaired the next section with the help of his daughters. Now, you know, again, I'm not trying to drive home a nail here, but, you know, look, the girls were out there helping. It is, you know, we might have a silly argument and say, no, this is man's work. Okay. Let me just leave it at this. I love that there's a family. Here's a man with his daughters, and they're like, look, Dad, we're going to help. We're going to help build this wall back. And, you know, in Christ, there's no male nor female, Jew nor Greek. I understand about different roles and things like that and all the theological constructs and arguments we can have, but sometimes we are just we'd prefer to fight than to go, okay, look, here's an example of someone, a man and his daughters that are just working, building this wall. And so just, I love this. So going back to my main point about this section is, when rebuilding, everyone can and should be doing something. Everyone can and should be doing something. All right, so that's kind of the first snapshot. Here's the next one. Next to him, the repairs were made by their fellow Levites. I'm not going to even try these names. Next to him, this group repaired a section from a point facing the ascent to the armory as far as the angle of the wall. Very specific. Next to him, Baruch, son of Zabbai, zealously repaired another section from the angle to the entrance of the house of Eliashib, the high priest. And the next to him, Meremoth, son of Uriah, the son of Hakaz, repaired another section from the entrance of Eliashib's house to the end of it. And on we go. Now, what do you see there? What's a key phrase? Next to him, right? Next to him. Next to him. Okay. The thought here is that when rebuilding, it must be done together, right? working side by side, we have strength. I mentioned the fact about going out in front of your house and building, but I know one thing that this is kind of silly, but it encourages me on a Saturday when I look out and I see my neighbor across the street doing something in his yard, and the neighbor next to him doing something, and my neighbor's out there doing something, and not everybody's able to, but it's interesting. You kind of get a little extra. Let's go. Let's go. Let's get the yard cut. Let's get the hedges looking good. And there's a camaraderie, just like on a mission trip. There's a camaraderie or a disaster relief project. Let's get going on this rebuild. You do this, I'm next to you. You're next to them. You're next to them, and you get going, and you're able to rebuild and strengthen each other. And when you're slowing down and getting tired, I'll come over and help you. When I'm slowing down, you come over and help me. I just love that. And again, you've got this whole situation going. What about that first morning? I mean, you think about this. That first morning when they walked out, and it's just such a blessing to see all these other people working on something. And there's these different routines and the noises and the excitement. And you're looking over there, and there's this fellowship of the brick, is what I call it. Fellowship of the brick, right? We're both laying bricks. We're both digging through the rubble to find what we can reuse. And you've got these priests rebuilding. You've got Baruch who's zealously repairing. And I mean, if you've ever been around somebody who is zealous, excited, enthusiastic, it gets you excited, right? If they're getting after it, let's get after it, and it just kind of gets your energy level going. And so I love that. And anyway, I think this is a great point about the camaraderie and the togetherness of rebuilding together. So let's continue to look here at this last section. So again, now you come to this Nehemiah 3:5, and this is not a positive thing. And this, I'm actually looping back to the beginning of chapter 3. But it says, the next section was repaired by the men of Tekoa, but their nobles would not put their shoulders to the work under their supervisors. Huh. Well, my point is going to be, when rebuilding, one cannot sit on top of the wall. It's such a discouragement. Again, you're going back to those folks that there's two kinds of people, right? Those who are opposed to God's work and those who are joining God's work. And there's not really a third kind. There's not really a third kind of those who are not joining God's work. If you're not joining Him, if you're not joining God's work, then you're opposed to it. And here's these officials, if you will, these nobles, and they're too good to work. Whatever it is, they're willing to just sit on top of the wall and be comfortable and criticize or critique, I should say, all of these people that are earnestly, zealously working. And what a discouragement, I'm sure, that was to the people that some of their leaders and those that may have survived some of this in a little better situations. They weren't living in this pile of junk where all these stones have been knocked over and things burned down and they can't find food and water. These are the nobles. And it's like, I want you to repair that so I can live good again. But they're not lifting a finger to help. Now, I'm thankful that we have elders that get their hands dirty. They know the sheep. There was a great book that Lynn Anderson put out about elders, and it said they smell like sheep, and because they're shepherds, they are with the sheep. And Jesus was not sitting in some synagogue somewhere. He was with the people, and healing and sleeping and eating and teaching and living and walking. And I love the contrast. That's the way it's supposed to be. And the fact that these nobles would not do that is to their shame. And so it's interesting. about that. So really, those are kind of the things that I wanted to point out. I'm going to see if I have another slide. I'm not sure that I do. I think that's the last one. But we're going to see. I'm just going to give you a hint, a little preview. We're going to see these guys again: Tobiah, Sanballat, Geshem, and this is not the first difficulty that Nehemiah and the people are going to face. But I guess I have a question, and maybe this is the application question. And I think I know the answer to this. At least for me, I know the answer. But which one of those kind of people are you? Simple question. And I will confess, I have been both. I have been the one who's been opposed to God's work, maybe primarily because I was not joining it. I was sitting on the sidelines, maybe not actively opposing, but not helping. So that's opposing. And I've also been blessed at times to join God's work. And that's kind of the question here. Nehemiah and these people had decided, okay, we're in a mess. We're in a pickle. And God's put this challenge on Nehemiah's heart and this call, and he's begun to answer prayers and needs, and let's do this. This is from God. Let's rebuild. And they're facing opposition and some laziness by their leaders in some cases. And I guess the challenge for us is to say, which one am I? And we can all, again, look back on our lives and say, well, at this point I was this, and at this point I was that. But what about now? What about right now? Which one would you say you are? And just be honest with yourself. You don't have to comment. You don't have to tell me or anybody, but just between you and God. Which one are you? Which one am I? And I'll be honest, Brett's lesson really encouraged me this morning that I need to be a little more aggressive about using my talents. And so I think that I think right now I'm sitting on the wall, and I need to get my tail end off the wall, and I need to start picking up some bricks and enjoying that fellowship of the brick, so to speak. So anyway, lots of good information there. I encourage you to read this end of chapter 2 and chapter 3 and begin to get a vision of what's going on there in Jerusalem at this time. And imagine yourself there, waking up and hearing all the rude, crude kind of tools chipping away, and people yelling and working and noise, and just get excited about the process of rebuilding. And again, as we think about this this book, it's a lot of applications. It can be about rebuilding our own lives. It can be about rebuilding our church. It can be about rebuilding our family. It could be rebuilding our spiritual life. There's a number, rebuilding our marriage. There's a lot of things that this could apply to. And so I encourage you to overcome and to look past the opposition, the fear that induces, and to take some steps towards rebuilding and begin the work that God's called you to. We'll wrap it up. I see my time is about 5:36, and I hope the sound has worked and the PowerPoint has worked, or whatever the scenes, the slides have worked. I appreciate it so much. I've been seeing a lot of good comments on the side. Again, it's probably it's a little difficult, honestly, to I'm not getting all of the comments, but I see some good things on here. I really appreciate that, and I'll continue to work on doing a better job of getting those involved in the discussion. But next week we have a parking lot service at 5 o'clock, and so we will not be having a Nehemiah study, so we'll resume that in 2 weeks. I encourage everybody, if at all possible, come, and if you're uncomfortable being exposed, sit in your car and tune in on the radio. If you feel like it, if you're a little more daring, come on out and pull up a chair in front of your car. All the cars will be spaced at least a spot apart. And but we would love to have you for a message and some singing and just to be able to see some faces, even if it's through glass, right? You get to see some folks, and we've enjoyed those, and it's time to do another one. So anyway, it's been great being with you guys tonight. I hope that God truly blesses you and me as we try to rebuild, and I'm excited to watch what He's doing because He is opening doors and doing things. So anyway, all right. God bless. Keep digging in the Word of Nehemiah, and we'll talk to you in a couple of weeks about Nehemiah chapter 4. I guess is what we'll be ready for, and you'll see the title is Opposition to the Rebuilding. Yeah, I told you it was coming. So anyway, all right. God bless. Take care, and we'll see you tomorrow at noon prayer.